Jake Martinez had inherited his grandfather's 40-acre ranch in Pine Valley 3 years ago, complete with a pristine mountain lake that had been in his family for over 60 years. The property sat adjacent to the Sunset Ridge subdivision, where the Homeowners Association had grown increasingly aggressive about expanding their control beyond their own boundaries. On this particular Tuesday morning, Jake was checking the fence line when he spotted something that made his blood run cold. A bright red for sale sign had been planted right next to his lake, complete with professional photos and a listing price of $2.8 million. The sign bore the logo of Meridian Realty and listed Karen Whitfield as the selling agent. Karen Whitfield also happened to be the president of the Sunset Ridge HOA. Jake pulled out his phone and dialed the number on the sign. A crisp, authoritative voice answered on the second ring. Meridian Realty. Karen speaking. How can I help you find your dream home today? Yeah, I'm calling about the lake property listing, Jake said, keeping his voice steady. The one for $2.8 million. Oh, wonderful. That's one of our premium listings. The Sunset Ridge Lake Estate is absolutely stunning. Private lake access, mountain views, and it's perfectly positioned for development. When would you like to schedule a showing? Well, here's the thing, Karen. I'm standing right next to this lake, and according to my deed, I own it. The line went silent for a long moment when Karen spoke again. Her tone had shifted completely. I'm sorry. Who is this? Jake Martinez. The guy whose property you just posted for sale without his permission. Mr. Martinez, I think there's been some confusion. The community lake belongs to the Sunset Ridge HOA. It's clearly stated in our covenants and restrictions. Perhaps you should consult with a real estate attorney before making such claims. Jake felt his jaw tighten. Karen, my family has owned this land since 1962. I've got the original deed right here in my truck. Your subdivision was built in 2015, sir. I'm going to have to ask you to remove yourself from HOA property. If you continue to trespass, I'll have no choice but to contact law enforcement. The call ended abruptly. Jake stared at his phone, then at the for sale sign, then at the lake that had been his family's refuge for decades. His grandfather had taught him to fish in these waters. His father had proposed to his mother on the small dock that still stretched into the crystal-clear depths. 20 minutes later, Jake was reviewing his property documents when he heard car doors slamming through his kitchen window. He watched as Karen Whitfield emerged from a white BMW, followed by two sheriff's deputies. Karen wore a perfectly tailored pink business suit and carried herself with the confidence of someone who had never been told no. Jake grabbed his deed folder and walked outside to meet them. Officers, thank you for coming so quickly, Karen was saying. This man has been harassing me over the phone and trespassing on community property. The HOA has invested significant resources in preparing this land for sale, and his presence is interfering with our legal business activities. Deputy Rodriguez, a middle-aged man with kind eyes, looked between Karen and Jake. Sir, can you tell me your side of this? Jake handed over his deed. This is my property. Has been for 60 years. Ms. Whitfield here decided to list my lake for sale without bothering to check who actually owns it. Deputy Rodriguez examined the documents carefully while Karen tapped her foot impatiently. Officers. HOA property records clearly show lake access rights. This man is obviously confused about boundary lines. Mom, do you have your HOA documents with you? Rodriguez asked. Karen's confident expression flickered for just a moment. They're back at the office, but I can assure you everything is in order. The Sunset Ridge development includes full lake access rights. Jake watched as Rodriguez compared the legal description on his deed with the GPS coordinates on his phone. The deputy's expression grew increasingly troubled. Ma'am, according to this deed, Mr. Martinez owns everything up to and including the lake. The legal description extends well beyond that fence line over there. Karen's face flushed. That's impossible. We've been planning this sale for months. The community has every right to monetize shared amenities. Mom, it's not a shared amenity if he owns it. But Karen wasn't finished. As the deputies prepared to leave, she pulled out her phone and made a call that Jake couldn't quite hear. Her voice was urgent, almost desperate. When she hung up, she looked directly at Jake with an expression that made his skin crawl. This isn't over, Mr. Martinez. The HOA has resources you can't imagine. We'll see who really owns what around here. As Karen drove away, Jake wondered what she meant by resources. He was about to find out that Karen Whitfield had connections throughout the county planning department, and she was prepared to use every single one of them. What would you have done when you discovered someone had listed your family's property for sale? 3 days after the confrontation at the lake, Jake's morning coffee was interrupted by a certified letter from Pine Valley County. His hand shook slightly as he tore open the envelope and read the contents. Notice of zoning violation and cease and desist order. Property owner is in violation of county ordinances regarding unpermitted structures, environmental impact regulations, and commercial use of residential property. Jake read the letter 3 times before the words sank in. According to the county, his dock was an unpermitted structure. His occasional fishing guide services for family friends constituted commercial use, and somehow his property was causing environmental impact violations. He was being fined $12,000 and had 30 days to remove all structures from the lake. Jake drove straight to the county planning office, where he was directed to a cramped cubicle occupied by Dennis Walsh, a nervous-looking man in his 50s who kept adjusting his glasses. Mr. Martinez, yes, I have your file right here. Multiple complaints were filed regarding your property. Very serious violations. Dennis, I've had that dock for 15 years. My grandfather built it in the 70s. What complaints? Dennis pulled out a manila folder thick with documents. Concerned citizens reporting unpermitted construction. Potential water contamination from commercial fishing operations. And obstruction of community water access rights. Community water access rights. It's my lake, Dennis. Well, that's what we're investigating. The complaints suggest there may be some confusion about property boundaries and usage rights. Jake felt his frustration building. Who filed these complaints? Dennis hesitated, then pulled out the complaint forms. Every single one was signed by Karen Whitfield in her capacity as HOA president. But each claimed to represent different concerned citizens. The handwriting on all of them was identical. Dennis, these are all from the same person. Well, she was representing multiple community members who preferred to remain anonymous. Did you verify any of these claims? Did anyone from the county actually come out to inspect my property? Dennis shifted uncomfortably. Ms. Whitfield provided very detailed reports and photographs. She's been very helpful to the planning department over the years. Very thorough. Jake realized what was happening. Karen had weaponized the bureaucracy, flooding the system with complaints to create an official paper trail that made her false claims appear legitimate. Dennis, I need you to come out and inspect the property yourself. See the actual boundaries. Check the deed records. Verify what's really going on. I suppose I could schedule an inspection. Next available appointment would be in 6 weeks. 6 weeks? Your letter gives me 30 days to comply. Well, you could always remove the violations voluntarily to avoid the fines. Jake left the county office feeling like he was trapped in a Kafkaesque nightmare. Karen had somehow turned his own property into a legal liability. That afternoon, Jake's neighbor Tom Bradley stopped by. Tom was a retired contractor who'd lived in the area for 20 years, long before the Sunset Ridge development existed. Jake, you hear what Karen's been telling people around town? What now? She's saying you've been illegally charging people to use community water resources. Claims you're running some kind of unlicensed fishing operation that's damaging the ecosystem. Jake sat down heavily on his porch steps. Tom, I take my nephew fishing maybe twice a month. Sometimes I help his scout troop with their outdoor activities. I've never charged anyone a dime. I know that. But she's got people believing you're some kind of environmental criminal. She showed up at the town council meeting last week with a whole presentation about protecting our water resources from commercial exploitation. She's trying to steal my property by making me look like the bad guy. Tom nodded grimly. The woman's got half the county officials in her pocket. She's donated big money to their campaigns. Sits on the Planning Commission Advisory Board. Hosts fundraisers at her house. When Karen Whitfield calls, people listen. That evening, Jake's phone rang. The caller ID showed his attorney, Patricia Vance. Jake, I've been reviewing your case. I have to tell you, this is more complicated than we initially thought. What do you mean? Karen Whitfield has been very busy. She's filed liens against your property claiming unpaid HOA fees, despite the fact that you're not part of their HOA. She's petitioned the county to reclassify your land use permits. She's even contacted the state environmental agency claiming you're violating water quality standards. Can she do that legally? No. But she's created such a bureaucratic mess that it's going to take months and tens of thousands of dollars to untangle everything. She's betting you'll give up and sell to make the problems go away. Jake stared out at his lake, watching the sunset paint the water gold and crimson. This was more than just a property dispute. Karen was systematically destroying his life, using the legal system as a weapon. Patricia, what if we went on the offense instead of just defending? What do you mean? I mean, what if we found a way to turn the tables? Patricia paused. Jake, what are you thinking? I'm thinking Karen Whitfield might have made a very big mistake when she decided to mess with my family's land, as Jake hung up the phone. He had no idea that Patricia was already researching something that would change everything. Karen's own property had a secret that was about to surface, and when it did, the entire dynamic of their conflict would shift in ways neither of them could have imagined. Jake spent a sleepless night wondering how to fight back against Karen's bureaucratic assault when his phone rang at 7 a.m. Patricia Vance sounded more excited than he'd ever heard her. "Jake, you need to get down to my office immediately. I found something that changes everything." 30 minutes later, Jake sat across from Patricia's desk as she spread out a collection of documents, maps, and photographs. "I spent all night researching Karen Whitfield's property history, and what I found is absolutely incredible. Jake, Karen doesn't actually own her house." "What do you mean?" "I mean, she's been living there illegally for 3 years. The property belongs to a shell company called Mountain Vista Holdings, which was supposed to be dissolved after a bankruptcy proceeding in 2021. The house should have been sold at auction, but somehow Karen managed to keep living there while the paperwork got tangled up in court." Jake stared at the documents. "So she's basically squatting in $1 million house." "It gets better. Mountain Vista Holdings was owned by Karen's ex-husband, Robert Whitfield. When their divorce was finalized, the company was supposed to liquidate all assets and split the proceeds. Instead, Karen used her connections in the county planning office to delay the property transfer indefinitely." Patricia pulled out another folder. "But here's the kicker. The bankruptcy trustee finally got tired of waiting. Karen's house is going up for auction next Friday. She has no idea because the notifications were sent to the legal address of Mountain Vista Holdings, which is a P.O. box that's been abandoned for 2 years." Jake felt a slow smile spreading across his face. "You're telling me that Karen's been trying to steal my property while she's been illegally occupying her own house?" "That's exactly what I'm telling you. And Jake, there's more. I checked the auction rules. Anyone can bid. The starting price is only $50,000 because of the complicated legal situation." Jake's mind raced. What would happen if someone bought Karen's house? The new owner would have immediate legal right to evict any unauthorized occupants. Karen would have to vacate within 30 days or face criminal trespassing charges. "Patricia, I want to buy the house." "Jake, are you sure? This could get very ugly very fast. She's been trying to destroy my life for weeks. She's filed false complaints, lied to county officials, and tried to sell my family's property." "What would you do if someone attacked everything your grandfather left you?" Patricia nodded slowly. "I'd probably buy their house too." The next Friday morning, Jake arrived at the county courthouse steps, where a small crowd had gathered for the property auction. Karen was nowhere to be seen. Jake recognized a few local real estate investors and contractors, but most of the people looked like bargain hunters hoping for a deal. The auctioneer, a tired-looking man named Carl Peterson, called the crowd to order. Next property is 1847 Sunset Ridge Drive. Beautiful four-bedroom home with mountain views. Starting bid is $50,000. Do I hear 50? Jake raised his hand. 50,000 to the gentleman in the blue shirt. Do I hear 60? A woman in the back raised her hand. The bidding continued steadily. Jake found himself competing with 3 other serious bidders as the price climbed past $200,000. At $300,000, 2 bidders dropped out. At $400,000, Jake was facing only one competitor, a real estate investor he recognized from around town. For $50 to the lady in red. Do I hear 500? Jake's heart pounded as he raised his hand. 500,000. The investor shook her head and stepped back. Jake had one dot as Jake signed the paperwork and handed over his cashier's check. His phone buzzed with a text message. It was from an unknown number. Congratulations on your new property, Mr. Martinez. I think you're going to find homeownership very educational. A friend. Jake stared at the message, wondering who could have sent it. Then his phone rang. The caller ID showed Karen Whitfield. Jake Martinez. What the hell do you think you're doing? I just bought a house, Karen. Isn't that what Americans do? You bought my house. This is harassment. This is illegal. Actually, Karen, I bought the house. That belongs to Mountain Vista Holdings, the company that went through bankruptcy 3 years ago. The house you've been living in without permission. The line went silent for a long moment. I don't know what game you think you're playing, but I have rights. I've been living there for years. You can't just throw me out. Karen, I own the house. Now, you have 30 days to vacate, or I'll have you arrested for trespassing, just like you tried to do to me at my own lake. This isn't over, Martinez. I'll fight this in court. I'll make your life hell. You already tried that, Karen. How's that working out for you? Jake hung up and looked at the deed in his hands. He now owned Karen Whitfield's house, and she had no legal right to be there. But as he drove home, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that Karen had one more card to play. Someone had sent him that cryptic text message, and he had a feeling he was about to discover what Karen meant when she talked about resources he couldn't imagine. What would you have done when you discovered your enemy had been living illegally in their own house all along? Jake's victory celebration was cut short the next morning when he arrived at his ranch to find Karen's white BMW parked next to his lake. She wasn't alone. A man in an expensive suit stood beside her, along with 2 people Jake didn't recognize, carrying surveying equipment. Jake parked his truck and walked over to the group. Karen looked different somehow, less polished than usual. Her normally perfect hair was slightly disheveled, and there were dark circles under her eyes. Karen, you're trespassing on my property. The man in the suit stepped forward. Mr. Martinez, I'm Richard Blackwood, Ms. Whitfield's attorney. We're here conducting a legal survey to establish the true property boundaries. There seems to be some confusion about where your land ends and the community water access begins. Jake pulled out his phone and showed them the GPS coordinates from his deed. There's no confusion. Richard, everything you're standing on belongs to me. You have 5 minutes to leave before I call the sheriff. Karen finally spoke, her voice tight with barely controlled anger. Jake, you think you're so smart, buying my house, but you made a mistake. A big one. What mistake is that, Karen? Richard Blackwood opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. Mr. Martinez, are you familiar with mineral rights laws in this county? Jake felt a cold chill run down his spine. What are you talking about? When your grandfather purchased this land in 1962, he bought the surface rights but not the mineral rights. Those were retained by the original mining company. 3 months ago, Mountain Vista Holdings purchased those mineral rights from the mining company's successors. Karen's smile was predatory, which means, Jake, that while you own the surface of this land, I own everything underneath it, including the right to extract resources. Jake's mind raced. You can't mine under a lake. Actually, we can, Richard continued. Modern extraction techniques allow for horizontal drilling that wouldn't disturb the surface. However, we would need to install monitoring equipment and access points around the perimeter of the lake. Which means, Karen added with satisfaction, I have legal right to access my mineral rights. I can put equipment anywhere I need it to protect my investment. Your precious lake is going to become an industrial site whether you like it or not. Jake stared at Karen, realizing the depths of her planning. She had orchestrated this entire conflict not just to steal his property, but to gain control of valuable mineral rights underneath it. There's just one problem with your plan, Karen. What's that? Jake pulled out his phone and called Patricia Vance. Patricia, it's Jake. Can you conference in our friend from the bankruptcy court? Karen's expression shifted from triumph to confusion. As Jake put the call on speaker, Patricia's voice came through clearly. Jake, I have Judge Morrison on the line. Judge, can you explain to Ms. Whitfield what you discovered about Mountain Vista Holdings? A deep, authoritative voice joined the call. Ms. Whitfield, this is Judge Morrison from the Federal Bankruptcy Court. I'm calling to inform you that all assets and rights held by Mountain Vista Holdings, including any mineral rights purchases made in the past year, have been declared void due to fraudulent conveyance. Karen's face went white. What does that mean? It means, Ms. Whitfield, that you used company assets to purchase those mineral rights while the company was in bankruptcy proceedings. Those rights now belong to the bankruptcy estate, which means they'll be auctioned off to pay creditors. Richard Blackwood was frantically flipping through his papers, Your Honor. We weren't aware of any bankruptcy issues. Mr. Blackwood, your client has been illegally using a dissolved company to make major purchases while avoiding her legal obligations to creditors. The FBI's white-collar crime division is very interested in speaking with Ms. Whitfield. Karen's legs seemed to give out. She sat down heavily on Jake's dock, staring at the water with a look of complete defeat. Jake looked down at her. Karen, you tried to steal my property, file false complaints against me, and manipulate the legal system, but your biggest mistake was thinking you were smarter than everyone else. Patricia's voice came through the phone again. Jake, there's more good news. Since Karen has been living in your house illegally and has no legal right to be there, and since she's now facing federal fraud charges, the sheriff's department is prepared to escort her off both properties immediately. 20 minutes later, Jake watched as two sheriff's deputies helped Karen load her belongings into her BMW. The surveying equipment was gone, and Richard Blackwood had disappeared without saying goodbye. Deputy Rodriguez approached Jake as Karen's car pulled away. Mr. Martinez, I have to apologize. We should have investigated Ms. Whitfield's claims more thoroughly from the beginning. No harm done. Deputy Sometimes people need to learn that actions have consequences. As the dust settled, Jake walked down to his dock and sat in his grandfather's old fishing chair. The lake was perfectly still, reflecting the mountains like a mirror. His phone buzzed with a text from Tom Bradley. Heard Karen's moving out of town. Something about federal investigators. Property values in Sunset Ridge just went up 20%. Thanks for getting rid of our horror problem. Jake smiled and typed back, just protecting what my grandfather left me. 3 months later, Jake stood in the same spot where this whole mess had started. But now there was a new sign next to his lake. Instead of private property, it read Martinez Family Ranch, Estate, 1962, fishing lessons available. Sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to let bullies win. Karen Whitfield learned that when you try to destroy someone's legacy, you might just lose everything yourself. And Jake Martinez learned that sometimes standing up to power means fighting fire with fire. What would you have done when faced with someone who tried to weaponize the legal system against your family's heritage? The truth is, most people would have given up long before Jake did. But his grandfather had taught him that some things are worth fighting for, no matter the cost. In the end, the lake remained exactly where it had always been, reflecting the mountains and holding the memories of 3 generations of the Martinez family. And Karen Whitfield's house became a nice rental property that helped pay for Jake's legal bills. Justice, it turns out, sometimes comes with a mortgage payment. And hey, if this story hits something in you and you want to support the channel, that little thanks button's always there. Thanks for hanging out. We're Hoa Headache Stories, and this is just one of many unbelievable tales. Catch more by checking out the next video. We promise it's even wilder.